Hello, and welcome to Cheers to Fears, where we take horror films and turn them into drinking games. We are your two hosts. I'm Tucker.
And I'm Alex. Today, we will be making a drinking game for It Follows, written and directed by David Robert Mitchell.
It follows an entity following Jay. Try saying that 3 times fast. She goes all the way with her boyfriend one night, but instead of love and compassion, he ends up chloroforming her and tying her to a wheelchair. He then shows her a mysterious entity that now wants to kill her because she slept with the person who last had the disease. And if it kills Jay, it will come after him next. Jay then gets help from her friends that will try their best to help protect her from the disease.
We will be moving on to our drinking game rules very shortly. In saying that, we will now inform you that it is time we will have a spoiler warning in effect for the rest of the video. So if you want to watch the movie spoiler free, we will post the rules on screen now. If you are still with us, let's go ahead and take a look at the rules.
So as per usual, the first rule is death, and this is again another example of very few deaths in the movie, with there only being 2.
Super low count this time around.
Yeah.
I feel like the first death in general is kind of what makes us afraid of the entity. We just kind of saw the impact of the death, just the leg all distorted, destroyed basically.
Yeah.
If we see the death in general, if it doesn't look that horrific, we probably wouldn't have been scared of the entity the entire movie.
Yeah, there's no reason to be scared of it if you don't see what it can do, I guess. So yeah, there's pretty much no deaths in the movie. Like, that first death happens off screen, we just see the aftermath. And then we only see one other kill in the movie, I guess. So another pretty low one, just like Psycho, our last episode.
Yeah.
So 2 in a row with not very many deaths, I guess.
Yeah. Now moving on to Screams, Cries, and Yells. This has 13 sips, which is surprisingly low. But
For a modern horror
yeah,
movie
for a
especially.
modern horror movie, definitely.
Yeah.
Not as low as Psycho, but low for sure.
Yeah, at least it reached double digits this time around. And I think the main reason that it didn't have more is because there wasn't a whole lot of conflict amongst the friend group, which is what we saw most of the time.
Yeah, in most movies, there's usually some sort of conflict between the same party, rather, than other people. Or just a lot more bloodshed and people screaming through that, I'd say.
Yeah, so moving on to our rules that are specific for It Follows. Starting with if people have intercourse, you gotta take a sip, which it only resulted in 4 sips, which actually surprises me. I thought it would have been more because of the premise of the movie, but it was, again, pretty low with only 4.
Yeah. What makes this rule worse is the entity generally transforms into parents.
Yeah.
So, for example, in the climax, no pun intended, it turns into Jay's dad.
Yeah.
With Hugh, it turns into his mom in the first scene. It turns into Greg's mom when the entity kills him.
And I think this whole premise of where you need to have sex with more people to kind of pass on the disease, in a sense, or I guess lengthen the line until you get affected by it. I think that's a cool and unique twist in horror movies, because generally it's a slasher sin. If you have sex, you get killed. So
Yeah.
not in this one. It's almost reversed, I guess.
Yeah, well, it's just if you have sex, you die, but if you have more sex, you live.
Well, yeah, I guess that's true. So
Yeah.
the slasher sin still does apply. If you have sex, you die. It's just you gotta carry it on.
Yeah. It feels like a vengeful spirit that gets jealous, so it kills you and the person you slept with.
Yeah.
If you want to say that.
That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. So next rule we have is when you see the entity, the disease, whatever you want to call it, take a sip.
Yeah. And this is, I guess, another running theme for this drinking game. It's only 12 sips.
Yeah.
It's double digits. It's one of our higher rules, I think, but it's still only 12, so it doesn't happen all that much, I guess.
Also, we should point out that whenever we see it change forms from something then into another thing, that's another drink.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's an important note to me.
It doesn't happen too often, but it ups the tally by at least like 1 or 2.
Yeah, exactly.
It could look like someone you know, or it could be a stranger in a crowd. Whatever helps it get close to you.
So moving on to rule number 5, it's whenever they're driving to a further location, you have to take a sip. They usually do this to try and outrun the disease that's following them, because obviously it can't run, it can only walk, and at a very slow pace, I will say. So basically they just try to get as far away as possible to give them as much time as possible away from this entity.
I feel like there's a few things they can do differently to try to beat the entity, but I feel like this is the easiest short-term solution.
Yeah, it's the easiest one to come up with, like, on the fly too.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of obvious. It's almost common sense in a way that we need to get away from this thing. It can't run. Let's just drive as far away as we can.
Yeah.
And this rule only gave us 11 sips. It is another double digits, but it's only 11 again. So.
Next rule we have, number 6, gives us 11 sips, which is if you see a body of water, you drink.
Yeah, that's 2 rules in a row that gave us 11.
Yeah.
So I didn't think we would see this rule since we had it in La Llorona, which we don't talk about that movie in this channel anymore. But a lot of this movie does take place in a sea or a pool, interestingly enough. So it's worth including in the rules for that reason.
It's weird to think how many times you see water in the movie, or just like bodies of water, like lakes or pools. I feel like there's almost 3 separate times. You see Jay's pool, the beach that they're at, and like the pool that the climax takes place at. Yeah. It's weirdly a strange amount of water.
Yeah, and it's something you would never notice without this drinking rule in place. But like, yeah, I definitely didn't notice this several times. I've seen it before this drinking game.
Yeah.
Moving on to another rule that involves the disease or the entity, whatever you want to call it. It's whenever you see the disease as invisible, you need to take a drink. This rule resulted in 5 sips, so it's a pretty low one, but it is kind of important with the plot, I guess, and anything surrounding the entity is worth adding as a rule.
Yeah, it's just kind of neat to see the perspectives of it.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Like, I feel like the main scene that kind of comes to mind is when it's just kind of lifting up Jay by the hair, and then people just kind of start to notice it. Because it's at that point they don't know if it's real or not. Even Jay's like, is it really real?
Yeah.
And then they see that scene, and then everyone's like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Next up, if you see nudity, you take a sip.
Yeah, and this one is another low one with only 4 sips. And it's pretty much only the entity that's nude, I think.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
That sounds about right. Basically, that makes it 2 drinks. Because if we see the entity, we drink, so that's basically...
it's double up, yeah.
It's doubled up.
Moving on to the next rule is if somebody is running, you have to take a sip.
That equivalated to 5 sips. Generally, they're running to a vehicle, and that's pretty much all there is to say. Sometimes it's doubled up, sometimes it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah. 10th and final rule, we have whenever we see that stupid shell book thing, you take a sip.
Yeah, what was that thing even supposed to be?
Yeah. I have no fucking clue. I think it was a book, phone, but primarily a book? I don't know.
Yeah. Either way, it ended up with 6 sips.
Yes. I think the character Yara was actually in Channel Zero's Butcher Block, so that's a fun fact for you.
Yeah.
Yara, of course, being the person with a shell book in It Follows.
Yeah. And that wraps up the rules for It Follows, and that gives us a total amount of sips of 73, which is even lower than Psycho, which we thought was extremely low.
Yeah.
This only gave us 2.5, actually less than 2.5 standard 12-ounce cans.
In saying that, we definitely expected Psycho to be lower than this, and like even if you look at the numbers in face value, I feel like you'd even expect this to be higher than Psycho.
Yeah, and I think it's because the rules are a little bit more balanced in this.
Yes.
With Psycho, we had the rule where mother was said, which just increased that value a lot.
Yeah.
This doesn't have any rule like that.
Yeah. So, for example, like no rules exceeded 13 drinks.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
like even if they all averaged like 13 drinks, that would still be 130.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. And so that makes this drinking game the easiest by far, by a lot.
Yeah.
And in saying that, it really only picks up when the entity shows up, which is a drink, and it's usually near a body of water, which is another drink. So they kind of all clump together in one little cluster of drinks here and there throughout the movie, but it's still not too much.
And the movie was even like very well paced, but the thing is, it was just so few, so you can't really say it's well paced.
Yeah. Again, it's kind of just casually drinking.
Yes, it's a very casual movie, I'd say.
This is a movie you can watch on a work night and still show up to work just fine.
Yeah. In saying that, I feel like this is kind of a relief after releasing 14 videos in October.
14 videos that all were pretty high counts.
Yeah.
Like, the whole Halloween franchise was, I'd say the average was probably 5 drinks for each video.
Yeah,
so
5 drinks, at least like 130, give or take.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of a nice break from all that drinking.
Definitely. So I guess, yeah, it's because all the rules were either like decent or like very low. So for example, 6 rules were 6 drinks or below in this movie. And I guess the main thing is the fucking shell phone, which we'll start out with that.
Yeah.
So the shell phone kind of has like this whole thing which makes the movie kind of feel like you don't really know what time area it takes place in.
Yeah, you don't know what year it's set in or like anything like that.
Yeah, so you see like cell phones, you see fucking shell phones, you see like 2006 made cars, and you see like black and white TVs.
Yeah, and it was an intentional choice from the director to do that, just to confuse people and make it even more, I guess, wondrous as to why or when this is taking place.
Yeah, it's to make it feel like kind of a fever dream in a way.
Yeah, exactly.
And like even in the movie, like you don't even know what fucking season it is, like what time of year it is. Like they wear jackets one day and the next day they're like fine outside, like wearing bathing suits.
Yeah, that's true, and it's interesting. It's an interesting choice, I guess, and I do like the decision to do that, just because it does add that extra layer. Like you said, it's a fever dream in a way, and it just makes the viewer more confused. But I think it works in this movie to not have a dedicated setting or year or season or anything like that.
Yeah, it just makes it super, super unique, I feel.
Yeah, exactly.
And going off of your point, how it's the director's intention to have it like this. The movie was actually based off of one of his reoccurring nightmares, which is there's just some stalker just slowly walking towards him.
Yeah, it's interesting to know. I didn't actually know that, so it makes a lot of sense though when you do learn that.
Yeah. However, the sex part obviously wasn't added in. He added it in after. But again, as we were talking about before, it just makes the movie so much more interesting because the sex premise, if you sleep with more people, you live.
Yeah.
Or if you sleep with one person, you die.
Yeah, which it kind of follows that slasher trope that we have learned over the years.
Yeah,
but it also elevates it to a new level, I guess.
Yeah, it's like almost a mockery against it.
Yeah, exactly.
So I guess for this movie, there's a lot of things that you could probably do to prevent you getting killed by the entity.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So many options, honestly. I've heard so many online, such as like you can put it in cement, let the cement harden.
Yeah.
That one might be a little more tricky to get away with, just because of how long cement takes to dry.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you put it in a wood chipper, then put it in cement.
Yeah, I guess. And then another option, which I feel like is one of the more, it's one that you would think of easily, is move to another continent.
Yeah.
That one's probably it's not easy to do because you gotta just uproot your whole life and go to another fucking continent, but it's still one of the more likely things to do, I guess.
Yeah. I guess a lot of this, you can just go a grenade at it, then try to do something from there.
At least see how it gets damaged by that. But
yeah. In saying that, there's like only so much you can do without trying to become a national security threat.
Yeah, that's true. And I feel like, in my opinion, the really only good way to escape it is get a second home in another continent. Once you see that it's kind of getting close or whatever, just avoid it for a couple days while you get your ticket to the other continent back home.
I mean, what if you sleep with somebody overseas?
Yeah, just do that, I guess.
And then you just win.
Yeah.
Just make sure it's not on the plane when you leave and you're fine. Going back more relative to the actual movie itself, the sound was great. The soundtrack was made by Disaster Piece.
Okay.
I haven't really heard of them besides this movie, but I feel like it was really, really good.
Oh yeah, it was really well done and it was effective. That's, again, 2 movies in a row that had a good score, and it was different, obviously, than Psycho. It's not the same, but it still was effective.
Yes. As for characters, I feel like none really stand out that much, but I feel like a lot of nods and even like a lot of the actors. So for example, Paul actually was the young Henry from Dead Silence, our very first episode.
Okay.
Which we don't talk about a lot because we feel like we've had a lot of better episodes since that. So if you
we've improved in many ways, I think.
So if you want to watch one of our episodes, watch another movie that we reviewed, such as Don't Breathe, which the character that plays Greg is in that movie too. He plays Money, and both of which are based in Detroit, weirdly enough.
Yeah, true.
Also, it's weird to say that he plays Money. They look nothing alike.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. They look totally different. So now that we got all that out of the way, what was your thoughts on this movie?
I thought it was one of the better horror films, especially of the modern age anyways.
Yeah.
The concept's just super unique, score is great, even the character development up to a certain point is good. You kind of see Paul want to be with Jay even though he's kind of a wimpy bitch. So she chooses Greg instead.
Yeah.
Greg dies, so... Yeah, I feel like the whole concept in itself is just super good though.
Yeah, I agree. And it was a fun movie to watch just because you said like it was so unique, and just the whole setting being kind of like a fever dream, like we talked about, was another element that I really did enjoy. So there was a lot of good things in this movie, and it's worth watching and worth rewatching, honestly. And this would be, even though the amount of drinks for this movie is pretty low, it's still worth watching and still worth playing the drinking game too. And maybe you have some more rules that you thought of that you could add to up the total amount of drinks, but it's worth watching for sure.
Definitely.
And finally, we've come to the award ceremony, where we award one not-so-lucky nominee the Darwin Award. This award goes out to a character who made a stupid decision that resulted in them getting killed, someone else getting killed, or simply resulting in something bad happening that could have easily been avoided. This award can also be given to a character who is just plain dumb. Here are the nominees.
Today's first nominee is Greg, for not believing Jay when she is being attacked by a monster, despite everybody else agreeing with her, as they see the monster trying to murder her. Not to mention, he doesn't believe her and still sleeps with her, so he's kind of a prick for that as well.
The next nominee is Paul, for not knowing anything about gun safety and trying to shoot an invisible target, and instead shoots one of his friends and narrowly misses another.
He was the final nominee, which coincidentally makes every male lead a Darwin Award nominee. He was nominated for tying up Jay when he could have easily elaborated more on the disease that he passed on to her. He did not need to break Jay's trust by chloroforming her, considering she was already on his side. Instead, you got a police report with your name written all over it.
And the winner is Paul, for shooting at the disease to try to kill it, but coming closer to killing his friends than the entity in question. It's weird to think that an entity trying to kill Jay was in the room, and yet the odds of Paul killing Jay are higher than the entity doing so because he is aimlessly shooting at an invisible target in a pool that is behind Jay.
And with all that being said, we hope you enjoyed our episode on It Follows. If you end up playing the game alongside the movie, or if you have any other feedback or suggestions, let us know in the comments below. Also let us know in the comments what you think the best way of dealing with the entity is.
Make sure to like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next week's episode, where we are going to be making a drinking game for Rosemary's Baby, released in 1968. Just another reminder to please give us a vote by commenting on Horror Flicks with Nick's video, nominating us for Horror Tuber of the month of November. The link to that video is in the description below. If you want to check out our most recent video, click on the box on the top right. Or if you want to see a playlist of all the drinking games and movies we review, click on the box below it. Thanks for tuning in, and this is us saying, cheers to fears.